Welcome to another episode of Hutch on Hunting. This is your host, Bruce Hutchin, and we're heading out to Montana to visit with the new executive director as of September 2023, Justin Spring. Justin, welcome to the show.
Hey, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited in the warm up. We covered a lot of things that I want to dive into today. But one thing, ladies and gentlemen, Pope and Young has a rich history, and Justin's going to spend a little bit talking about the history, and then we're going to talk about the future of Pope and Young. So, Justin, kind of go back to the people who aren't familiar with Pope and Young and tell us why it was created.
So, I mean, in the very beginning, it was there was a group called the National Field Archery Association that was keeping records, kind of hunting records with a bow. Bow hunting had taken off. Many states were looking at having a season, but there really wasn't a unified group to really go to the states and present the case. And so, the founder, Glenn St. Charles, went to Boone and Crockett. He was the first member of Boone and Crockett that Boone and Crockett actually changed their rules. It said you had to take 3 animals in fair chase with a rifle. Well, he had done it with a bow. And so Boone and Crockett said, Glenn, that's a great idea. We'll authorize you to do our records, and then you can use our scoring system to collect data on archery trophies and petition these states to allow archery seasons. So that was the very beginning of it, was an effort to try to get archery legitimized by all the different states. From there they've built a very impressive records database of over 120,000 entries. And we've spent, the last 1960, so 62, 64 years, fighting to preserve bow hunting, ensure, seasons, ensure everything is good with archery hunting into the future. And, you can kind of follow the history of bow hunting, in the United States when it got adopted. I mean, that's kind of the history of Pope and Young Club.
Now, I remember the name Ishi. Now, how
Mhm.
does he factor into the Pope and Young Club?
So that Ishi, Pope and Young were two people. When Ishi had wandered out of the wilderness, he was the last Native American. There was an area in California that was unsettled. He basically, his family had died. He wanders out of the wilderness, and they take him to a university. And he was the one that first taught basically Western people about archery and building bows and everything. And so Art Young and Saxton Pope, those two were the ones that worked with Ishi, and that's our namesake. That's Pope and Young was the work that they did with Ichi and writing about archery and basically bringing it to the Western world, for lack of a better term. And so yes, Ishi is our highest honor. We give an Ishi award for an outstanding animal that's taken, but he wasn't actually involved in the creation of the organization. But we do rely heavily on what he taught both Pope and Young and in what we know for archery today.
Now, Pope and Young, what was the date of that? Was it 1800s or early 1900s?
I do not know that right off the top of my head. I think it was late 1800s, early 1900s was when that would have happened.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
As we talked about, I got a couple of friends. One, I'll give a shout out for Marv Klenke. And if you're into archery, he was a writer, traditional bow hunter, and renowned with his relationships throughout the archery community. And I was fortunate enough to serve on the board of Rocky Mountain Bighorn Society with him, and just incredible gentleman. And that holds true to all the people that I've met through, my relationships with Pope and Young. Just a great group of people. Um, and so I wanted to just, send some props out for that. So when you look at Pope and Young in the warm up, I mentioned to you my first elk actually was a Pope and Young bull, and you said, "Did you put it in the book?" I said, "No," because it really wasn't that important to me. And being the person that you are, and I'm getting to know, you said, wait a minute. There's a lot of reasons why you need to do that. So, listeners, I really want you to pay attention because it goes way beyond just saying, "Hey, I got my name in the book."
Yeah, so I mean, again, and this was the same thing. Before coming to Pope and Young, I spent 15 years in the Boone and Crockett Records program. The scoring manual that's used for both organizations, I was one of the main editors of the most recent version of that. So obviously, the records is my life. Um, I have a background in wildlife management, and that's what keeps me motivated. This was never designed to be a recognition of hunters. Has it become that? Certainly, but both Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young, they were using this as data to drive decisions, to drive management. And so Pope and Young looked at the records and said, hey, we want to keep a records. We want a data set of archery taken trophies to show states what's happening. And this isn't all positive, right? Maybe with the introduction of crossbows, or I mean, excuse me, with compound bows, we could say, hey, we had a higher kill rate. We can see this. So both these data sets, they're maintained as a conservation record. And if you don't care about your name in the book, that's fine. But we've got antis that are saying, hey, this is happening. I mean, I can calculate, the number of shots. I mean, when you do a Pope and Young entry, it asks, did you shoot it once? Did you shoot it twice? What was the distance you took it at? What type of equipment were you using? Every bit of that isn't, I mean, that's purely for us to be able to say, hey, there's a lawsuit in whatever state it may be saying that this isn't ethical or that hunters are doing this. This gives us the ability to have the rock solid data to say, no, here's what's actually happening. And a lot of folks I hear like, oh, I've got one in the book. It's my biggest. I've shot a bunch that would qualify, but they don't matter. Man, that data point's just as important as the biggest. I mean, are we seeing deer get smaller? That may have a reason, and that's what these data sets do. They don't tell you the problem, but if we can say, hey, this area used to put out, 10 Pope and Youngs a year, and now we're only seeing two, what changed there? Is it an age structure? Is it a conservation? Is there something we need to do? And so you got to remember these records are maintained as a scientific data set. And even if you could care less if your name's in the book, I always tell folks you owe it to future generations to make sure that that data is there to support your passion and hunting into the future. And like I was mentioning to you, every one of those is a valid data point. So I'm always encouraging folks to enter, always saying like, hey, this is a bigger thing. This is not just, oh, I'm numbered, 3,244. I mean, that's completely irrelevant. It's the fact that you have this animal that was taken in fair chase with archery tackle in this location at this date using these methods. That's why we're keeping it.
As you were talking, I was thinking about the farm in Wisconsin I've hunted since 1966 with both rifle, shotgun with slugs, and archery. Not traditional. I used a vertical bow, compound, and then now in my crossbow. And I just thought back, okay, if we had all that information someplace of all the, Pope and Young bucks we had taken off, and the best one, memory serves me right, Garrett took one 3 or 4 years ago. And the oldest buck we've taken off the farm, it was a 180 class deer.
Wow.
It just, and
Mhm.
the farmer, he's taken a 173, but with his rifle. But that was Garrett's buck is the biggest buck we've ever taken off the farm. I've got a 130 something and a 140 something, and throughout those whole years, because we just don't get large deer, but we get a lot of what would make the minimums at
Mhm.
125. I think every year somebody, shoots at least one, and we got multiple, 125s, which isn't all that bad when you span the time. And I'm thinking, wow, that would have been cool if we could have kept, you know, the the neighbors, the cousins, and the owner. If we had that data, then we'd have really a great history of what the farm has done over, since 1966.
Yeah, no, and I mean there's a Acoma, Pueblo in New Mexico. Their biologist is official measure, and I met him through Boone and Crockett actually. But any elk they take, they score everything. And that's exactly why. That's what the system was designed to do, is build that history. Are we doing good? I mean, does our tine links go down in a drought year? Do we see more deductions? Do we have more breaks in a drought year? What actually happens? And when you have that long-term data set, it's amazing what we can uncover.
Yeah. Do you know Tom Enderbro from Buffalo County? Have you ever heard of him?
And the name sounds familiar. I don't know him personally.
Yeah, he is involved with North American whitetail.
Mm-hmm.
Great photographer, super photographer, and he's been there. His farm's been there forever, and that would be a great guy um, for me to link you two guys up because I don't know. I've been in his office. He's got over 100,000 whitetail photos. There's no question about that. But I don't know the data sets that you're talking about that he has because he's had that farm probably 40 years, 50 years.
Wow.
And Buffalo County is known as the top Boone and Crockett County in the country.
Yep.
Last year was a rough year on that farm. I try to hunt it when I can, because like everything else, it's getting expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's not cheap to hunt Buffalo County, and well, it's not cheap to hunt any place, and that's why our farm down on the Baraboo River is so priceless to me because, I've got, you know, 200 acres or so that I can hunt.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major thing we're facing, and in hunting and trying to recruit new hunters. I mean, it's very cost prohibitive to start it out. I mean, how much we know what it is. We've done it. We've been there. We understand how important it is to our, sanity, for lack of a better term. And so we can justify that cost to go to one of these locations. But man, a new hunter, that's a big pill to swallow to see, hey, is this even something I want to do? And that's one major fight that, all of the conservation groups, Pope and Young included, is always trying to do. How do we get that recruitment? How do we get folks to realize the value of this experience? And then they do have the ability to pursue it even more. Because I mean, it's getting very, very priced out, and it's unfortunate. I mean, I'm in Montana. I'm fortunate to live in the West. I'm in an area where I can reach a bunch of states with a bunch of public land very quickly. But most folks don't have that.
Let's stay right there and talk about, retention and recruitment and revitalization, the three R's, I think,
Yeah, the
that,
reactivation. Yep.
reactivation.
Yep.
And so let's talk about that, how Pope and Young is helping in your marketing, in your newsletters, in your meetings. How are you doing specifically doing that?
So we've always been very supportive of, outdoor camps and wherever we could to try to get kids involved. There's some great organizations out there, are archery in the schools, S3BA. There's a bunch of groups that are all working on it. We support a lot of them. We are looking at increasing our youth program, but it's trying to, how do you reach the most kids? And what I always tell folks, and what I've found is, I've got an 8-year-old son. He's going to be immersed in conservation and archery and all this. And so we've got these R3 funds. We need to make sure they're going to the kids that haven't had the opportunity to be exposed. Again, my son's going to be involved in it. He's got a dad that lives it and breathes it. We don't need to be spending those federal dollars that are now going to R3 on him. And so what I'm trying to do now at Pope and Young is figure out how we reach those kids that maybe haven't got the exposure, and maybe it's through a camp sponsorship, maybe it's through including some type of ethical archery hunting curriculum that would be available to teachers. We've got some pretty solid allies, and they don't even mean to be, but the Hunger Games and shooting a bow, how big did archery get after that? I just watched a episode of Survivor, and they're in Africa and they've got a bow and they shoot a cow eland. Man, that's going to the world. And so we need to find ways to engage those people, bring them into the conservation world, and tell them the story of why it's important to support this bow hunting, why ethical bow hunting, is the way to pursue it. We're under the watchful eye of the 70-something% of the country that does not hunt but actually approves of it. We need to make sure how we conduct ourselves as archers makes them believe that we are doing something ethically and with, the license that they've given us to do it continues. And so that's where Pope and Young's really trying to concentrate, engage these young hunters, say, hey, here's an opportunity to learn to bow hunt. I mean, here's a camp that we're going to give away, that come to Montana and see the wildlife and see the wild places and shoot a bow. Try to meet them there and help them along that journey is what we're really trying to focus on. And like I said, there's a bunch of groups. The biggest challenge I see is just making sure all these groups are on the same page. And that's where I come in as an executive director, that we're not competing with any of these other groups doing this great work.
One thing, a mentor, father, they call me, for fathers in the field. And that's about getting young men, 7 to 17, out in the outdoors. And those are the type of groups, I think, and there's a lot of them in the country, that would be a really good outlet for Pope and Young, for you guys to touch base with them. Our executive director, number one, they call mission servant, is John Smithbaker, who used to be the CEO of, hopefully I say this right, Bruton, up in Riverside, Wyoming, big outdoor company up there. And then he had an epiphany, if you will, and he decided, no, I'm going to leave the corporate world and I'm going to go help boys, fatherless boys. And those are the type of things that any conservation group, I would hope, would look at it and say, hey, one boy at a time, how can we help them enjoy the sport? Because like I talked about in the warm-up, I've been hunting whitetails since 1966. Yes, I'm not old, folks. Don't take it personally. And I'll be hunting. I don't get up in a tree stand anymore. I hunt from the ground now. But I've been doing it the same farm for a long time, over 50 years, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I love taking somebody out new with me and showing them the ropes. And I'll be doing that with my new field buddy for Fathers in the Field. And he's going to get his hunter safety card, and I'm going to teach him how to shoot a bow, and we'll go from there. But we need more men and women doing that. And saying the word woman, so how is Pope and Young embracing or educating women in the sport?
So we have a very active contingent, of female archers.
So Justin, we were just, before I was interrupted, we were just talking about Pope and Young and how they're helping to recruit people into the outdoors through bow hunting.
So, in terms of the women wanting to get into the outdoors, we've got some very active club members that are female bow hunters, and so we're trying to engage with them. We have a convention coming up in Phoenix, April of 2025. We'd love to have everybody there. We are going to do a women's event there, and that's going to kind of give us a little bit of kind of a seed to start developing these programs. But there's a lot of interest. My wife, actually, she's same degree as I have, passionate hunter as well. She's involved in a women's uncharted outdoors group that they have a lot of interest of women wanting to get out and learn to shoot and whatnot. And so, at this point, it's a lot of our members actually doing the on the ground work outreach, but that is something that we are looking to increase because we want to meet people where they are, and if they're intimidated by guns, but they want to look into hunting and feeding their family with a bow, man, we want to be the group that we come to. And maybe it's just to redirect to a group that's doing it. Like I said, this group my wife's working with, I know that they're putting in a bunch of effort, but it's all very important to make sure the folks that are interested are met where they want to be and taught what they need to know.
I think of that, a lady I had on my podcast first, it's January, so a couple months ago now, Amanda Lynn Mayhew out of Ontario, Canada, and she archery hunts every year in South Africa. And she has water holes and planes and I don't know exactly, the ownership setup, but she goes
Mhm.
there every single year. And she was so interesting. Have you ever heard her name? Because she has a big TV show up in Canada, and
It's not ringing a bell.
yeah, Amanda Lynn. So what I'll do after this is over, I'll send a connection for you and
Yeah.
her, because I I'm assuming Pope and Young is up in Canada.
Yeah, no, we definitely have majors up there and a presence in Canada as well.
Good. Because that's the thing I like to do. I talk to so many different people, and if I can connect them to make
Mhm.
it, the synergy and the benefit for all parties, that's a good thing. And I think in media we do that well,
Yeah.
across the board, because just like in Colorado, we have Save the Hunt, Colorado, about we got this Baron coming up. It's going to be a vote again.
Hmm.
Um, Against flying in the face of the North American model of wildlife conservation. Um, let the voter decide what's right, not the professionals and CPW decide what's right,
Yeah.
for managing the the species. Now, have you gotten involved in that at all, or you're familiar with what's going on?
Yeah, no, we are. I am, coming over from Boone and Crockett, I am really working on trying to get Pope and Young more engaged at the DC level. Like I said, when I was at the other organization, they were very involved with lobbyists and whatnot. And so, we are developing a conservation program. We are working with a lobbyist basically to kind of keep the ear to the ground for us in DC. So if there is some place that Pope and Young can step in and really make a difference or engage our membership, we are developing that program. In terms of the Colorado event, you've got some great folks working on that, and they've been at all the events that I've been at all year. We've chatted with them. Whether it's just letting our membership know about what's going on or where our place is with that, we haven't really developed that, but we have been in conversations. And, like you said, I mean, this ballot box biology is very problematic and it's
It's
not,
ridiculous. It's not
right now,
problematic. I'll just say
yeah,
it's ridiculous.
yeah. Colorado, everybody goes there for elk. It's a known location. So this is a great opportunity to say, hey, we've got people that have spent their entire careers figuring out how to manage wildlife. And when we're flying in the face of that, going on popular opinion, that's not really, the way that we brought wildlife back from the brink. The very study done in the United States was by Aldo Leupold. He worked for the Forest Service at the time, and it was funded by Boone and Crockett, a hunting organization. And so, all this science-based management, we were the ones that started that. I mean, that's why Pope and Young got the data. We wanted to give a science-based approach to the states on why archery hunting was a valid method of take and was useful and could be implemented. And so, all wildlife groups need to take notice when that scientific approach is disregarded. It's not good for anybody going forward. The wildlife, the users, the wildlife viewers, they don't realize that if we just start doing it by, heartstrings, it's not gonna we're gonna lose our wildlife in wild places if we don't rely on the science that's been developed over the last 100 years.
Amen to that. And ladies and gentlemen, Dan Gates is the gentleman. He's the tip of the spear here in Colorado, and I'll send you his. I
Yep.
interviewed him about a month ago. I'll send you his
No, I've
podcast.
yeah, I've got Dan's contact. I visited with him 2 or 3 times this
Great,
winter at different shows. He's making the same circuit I was, and so we're in close contact with him.
that's great because we need all the help we can get because we missed out on the wolves reintroduction by just a few points. It wasn't
Yeah,
that much different, and um, the radical people who don't want hunting in Colorado spent a ton of dough, and they won. But it's not science based, it's emotional based. People bought the narrative, and that's nowhere, that's no way to manage the resource. It's completely
No,
wrong.
and I mean, I'm in Montana. I literally, my parents have a 20 acres across the road. They had two wolves run through their field 2 days ago. We're around them. They're a species. They deserve to be on the landscape, but they need to be managed, and we don't need to be manipulating their natural progression, repopulating their original habitats. That's what the major problem with Colorado was. Again, let the animals do their thing. Build the habitat, let them come. That's how it needs to be done. Not again, not ballot box biology.
And I have a friend up in Unit 2, which is up by the Green River, and they had wolves on their property years ago, years ago. And
Yeah.
it just, unbelievable that people said, well, we're going to reintroduce them. No, they're already here, you know. So where's the science in that? There isn't, because they'll pioneer, they'll migrate, whatever term you want to use, because they'll come out of Wyoming and they'll drop down into Colorado. They're going to do that because there's food. And if the young pups grow up, and they're going to be kicked out of the pack or get killed. I mean, that's just how it is.
Mhm.
So they have to get a breeding pair, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
it's
I
it's
mean,
got to be science. That's
yeah,
that's my whole thing. It's
and
got to be science.
as a conservation group, our mission is to make sure that the money and the habitat management is there, that these species can increase. We want to see them all increase. We want to see them all expand their range. It's not that we dislike one or like the other more, any of that. No, it's like there's a way that we did this. There's a reason that we have the most successful wildlife populations anywhere in the world that are accessible to every single American, be it a hunter or a viewer or whatever. We built this amazing system. Let's
Yes, we
let's
did.
let's make sure that we continue down that road.
Because if you just go back to the history books and expansion west, the buffalo, everybody knows there were millions of buffalo, then there weren't millions of buffalo. And then the expansion, the white-tailed deer, the wild turkey, and you can go on and on and on to see, at the turn of the century where they were or weren't.
Right.
Now today, prolific, we're talking millions of turkeys, millions of white-tailed deer, millions of elk.
Well, and that goes right back to why I was lobbying you to enter those white-tailed deer. I mean, 50, 60 years ago, oh, I've got a bunch of them over 125. It doesn't really matter. Man, could you imagine telling somebody in the early 1900s that you'd have so many deer killed with a bow that he'd be like, whatever, no biggie. I mean, it's very, very important, for folks to realize where we came from and what we did. And I think a lot of my generation and younger, we hear the stories about, oh, we saw a deer track and the whole family jumped in the car and went across the state. Nobody in my age group and lower remembers that. There's always been wildlife, but that doesn't mean it can't go away if we don't continue on with good science.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see this. This was my first rifle hunt on the farm, same farm. It's a pickup truck, and
Yeah,
I, of those three deer, I shot two of them, and basket bucks we call them.
right,
And back then we were just hunting deer, and it was
right,
field to plate. See, that's the other thing that people don't understand. Back in the day, yeah, we were killing deer, but it was a social event.
yeah,
It was a huge social event. I got invited to to my buddy's farm. I was working for him in college, and he said, why don't you come go deer hunting? I said, what's deer hunting? I sort of kind of knew, but
right,
I had never hunted a deer. He said, well, yeah, you know, work a couple more hours and you can get a license, get a shotgun, get some slugs, get a pair of boots and some red, and
right,
we'll go
right.
hunting. And the thing I remember about it most, Justin, yeah, we went out and we made drives. then there were 10 or 15 people in the drives, 10 drivers and 5 standards. And, we did that, and we went farm to farm to farm because they knew everybody. So it was
Right.
just, hey, Bob, we're going to do a drive. Want to join us? Yeah, I'll join you. No, go ahead. Whatever. That was it.
Hmm.
Access was simple. And then so we'd go through and we'd shoot a buck, and then we'd clean it out, throw it in the pickup truck, take it back to the barn and hang it up right away
Mhm.
and hang it up. And at the end of the day, we'd show up, and the ladies would have a plank table. And if you don't know what that is, it's just boards on sore horses
Mhm.
and plank table full of food. Um, and the guys would get there, and they taught me how to skin out a whitetail, because they let them age in the
Mhm.
barn, and they'd be there, and we'd have whatever you wanted for food was there, including pies and beer. And we'd sit there, then we'd play euchre, or we'd play cards, under the lantern light. And so you started at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's 10 o'clock at night, and said, hey guys, we got to knock this off because we got to get up at 5 o'clock and do it all over again.
Right, right.
But you're talking 15 or 20 people in a community, and you're all accepted. Nobody went by title. Everybody knew who everybody else was anyway. And, I baptism by fire, and they said, okay, Bruce, you're going to drive. We don't want you shooting anything. You can carry a gun, but just, you're going to drive. You're going to drive. And then that's the first day. The second day, they said, okay, we're going to put you on a post. You're going to go to here. And my first deer, I was laying behind a log, and my buddy's in the field with a scope rifle, and he starts pointing at me. And he wasn't pointing at me, he was telling me a deer was coming. And so I popped up, and I had a 12 gauge shotgun, and I shot him, hit him once, hit him. Second time I hit him in the ear, and the rest of the shots I have absolutely nowhere. And my buddy's laughing. He says, Hutch, stop shooting. Stop shooting. He's dead. And that was one of the deer in that picture. Is just,
Wow.
and I was hooked ever since. But it was the whole community, it was the whole tradition. I came from, I should add this, from Massapequa, Long Island, New York to Wisconsin. So, this was a dream came true for me, and I've never left it.
Yeah.
Here I am, you know, 2024, you can do the math. And, here I am talking whitetail hunting, or talking hunting with one of the leaders in the industry, in the outdoor conservation movement. So it's exciting. It's been a great ride for me. I'm sorry I got winded there, but I
No,
just get
no.
excited. I just get excited.
No, it was, I mean, that upper Midwest, that Wisconsin, like I mentioned to you earlier, I went to school there and I came from the West. I came from Oregon, Blacktails, Roosevelt. We had hunting parties, but it wasn't the same deer camp mentality, and just getting to see that for the time I was in college. I mean, it's amazing. It's a whole nother aspect of hunting that I guess those in the West don't know. And, there's just so much out there from the region you're in. I could never imagine a world that's not available, and that's why I've chose to make this my career. Is those stories? Is that, man, I remember that first buck, or man, what if future generations don't have that? I mean, I remember my archery hunting Roosevelt's elk with my dad. There was a ranch. He worked for a timber company, and he'd purchased this ranch in timberland, and the family still lived down there, and they'd logged it, whatever, and basically it turned it into a great spot to elk hunt because of all the food. And there was 15, 20 people there, and the guy that was the archery hunter, he had the state record antelope. My dad would tell stories of when he was younger, going over to Eastern Oregon and shooting antelope and chasing mule deer. Well, they knew the elk so well that we'd all be set up, and they'd chase these Roosevelts down the hill, and it sounds like a freight train when a herd of Roosevelts is coming. Man, as a kid, before I could shoot, hearing that coming and watching those elk come tearing by, man, yeah, again, it's burned into you. And making sure that goes forward, and that archery aspect and the rifle aspect or the shotgun or the crossbow, people get real hung up on weapon specific and whatnot. Man, we're all hunters. We all love it. If you like to do it with a bow, great. I mean, if you like to do it with a rifle, great. I'm not picky, you know. Duck season, I'm a shotgunner. Montana, I'm fortunate. I get all of archery season to chase deer and elk with the bow, and then if I haven't filled the tag yet, I can switch over to gun. I'm not, I'm a bow hunter hardcore during bow season. I'm a rifle hunter hardcore during rifle season. And, we just need to make sure that this continues on and that we support the North American model. And, my son can be on a podcast in 40 years telling the same thing about him remembering his first hunts with mom and dad. That's what we're doing. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, and you know, I agree 100% on that. So let's talk about the future of Pope and Young.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're really trying to refine our efforts and make sure, we're not a giant organization. We're trying to grow. Obviously, we'd love support from everybody. We'd love you to be a member. Even if you're an aspiring bow hunter, there's no requirement that you have to have an animal in the book to be a general member. Get our magazine, learn about bow hunting, we aspiring archers, someone that maybe was an archery hunter earlier on, and like you were mentioning, you had to switch to a crossbow because you can't draw the minimum weight. I mean, you're still an archer. You're still welcome in Pope and Young. Okay, I can't draw the bow anymore. That doesn't mean that, we don't still want you involved. We don't still want, your opinion on where should we be spending our time and efforts. The R3, ensuring that archery moves forward, that's important. Pope and Young for a while had kind of a negative aura about it when bows first really started becoming technologically advanced. Pope and Young kind of stepped in and put some sideboards on it a little bit and said, guys, maybe this is getting a little too far ahead. You got to remember, and that's what the future of the club is making sure that archery hunting stays archery hunting. I always tell the story when I was a kid, though, again, we're talking about archery elk hunting. I could buy an over-the-counter tag. I could hunt every day of the season. Most years I didn't kill an elk, but every single day I was elk hunting, I was within 100 yards of them, and it was just that thick. The success was low. It gave ample opportunity. The harvest wasn't that high. The more successful we get through technology, the more successful we get, by making faster bows or better sights or whatever it may be, the higher that success rate goes. It's now to the point where Oregon, you have to draw the tag. You can't just buy an over-the-counter tag and go hunt. And so that's Pope and Young's place. It's not that technology is bad, but it's making sure that we as archers still have opportunity. I mean, if you have to wait 20 years to draw a tag, how many kids are going to stick in it? And so, like I said, we get some heat about being, oh, they're just old fuddy-duddies. No, there's a reason that we're looking at this technology. This is a reason that we're saying, like, hey man, is this making us too good? Is this increasing, our success rate? And that goes to our record system. Hey man, we're now seeing a success rate of this amount and this animal being taken. Maybe we need to look at this particular technology and say, hey, should we be limiting this either, by choice on our part or legislatively if it has to come to that, just to ensure that there is wildlife and opportunity for folks going forward. And so, between the DC work, the making sure archery is preserved, promoted, and protected, the future is busy and we need all the support we can get.
And folks, if you like to bow hunt, however, whatever that looks like for you, if you're not a member of Pope and Young, you need to be. It's what, $30, $25 a year?
Yeah, I mean, there's different membership levels. It's a $35 membership gets a magazine. You can do it online. Whatever you're comfortable with. We'd love, there's levels of membership. You need to be involved as a general member. Come to our convention. I mean, maybe you don't want to pay a yearly membership, but come to our convention for 2 or 3 days in Glendale in 2025, April 9 through 12, I believe is the date. See what the organization is about. Meet these bow hunters. We want to welcome everybody. We talked about some of these groups and the R3 efforts and trying to reach out to women. I'm going to be honest, we can't do all of that, but what Pope and Young can do is kind of serve as the national catalyst of, hey, this group's doing a great job of reaching kids. Let's bring all those kids groups and say, hey, look what these guys are doing. This is awesome. That's where we sit. And in order to be successful, we need representation from across the country, whether you're a new bow hunter, an old bow hunter, traditional, never shot anything but a compound. It really doesn't matter. You all have a place at the table in these discussions, ensuring archery hunting into the future. And so you can go on our website and join. Like I said, just get involved wherever you can, and we'll welcome you into the organization.
And your website is?
www.pope-young.org, or just Google Pope and Young, and we'll pop up.
So do you have like regional managers?
Nope, we have a our staff is spread out. Most of us are remote. Our sales marketing, he's in Kansas. Our records director's in Oregon. I'm the executive director in Montana. And so we have a staff of currently 8, I believe, kind of spread out. We have a guy in Texas, we have a person in Wisconsin, we have a person in Minnesota. So we're spread out all over the place, but we are not a big staff, which is why we count a lot on, local support, local volunteers being a part of the club. We need that to be able to complete our mission.
Now, if you go to your website, it says Chatfield, Minnesota. What's there?
So historically, we had a museum that was actually in Chatfield. That is in the process of being moved to the Wonders of Wildlife Museum, which is Johnny Morris's place in Springfield. And so we do have an office front in Chatfield where the certificates are printed and things like that. But we are more of a remote national organization, going where we're needed. And so yes, there is a storefront in Chatfield. If you find yourself in Chatfield, you can pop in. But, like I said, the museum used to be there. It's not anymore. That's now going to be in Springfield.
Now let's talk about scoring, because back in the day, I know I mentioned to you that when I was archery hunting, um, I looked into becoming a scorer. So what's that program like?
So, I mean, we have representatives, we're always looking for good applicants. I taught the workshops for 15 years for Boone and Crockett. A lot of people be like, "Oh, I've never scored. I don't want to sign up. I don't know what I'm doing." Honestly, some of the best students we had were those that had come in with no bad habits, for lack of a better term. But both the organizations, all the workshops we're doing now are done jointly. So if you go to a workshop, sponsored by Pope and Young, Kyle Lair, who's the director of records of Boone and Crockett, is the other instructor. So coming out of these courses, you're certified for both Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett. You learn the history of both organizations. We generally, it varies on the dates, but kind of a standard workshop, we'd have everybody arrive on Friday. You've got 2 or 3 hours of the history of the organizations and why we're doing what we're doing on Friday night. Saturday, Sunday, and Monday is 8 hours of scoring every single category. I always say you're certified to score anything from a whitetail to a walrus, where you'd go through and you score at least 2 of each species. There's quizzes, there's tests. It's a very standardized training. Again, we're keeping a scientific data set. This isn't, we're not, it needs to be uniform. It needs to be standardized. Everybody has to go through the same training, which is why we do these courses jointly. And then once you're done, there's a test, assuming you pass the test, which most folks do, as long as you're paying attention and engaged with the class, it's not a problem. Then you're certified as a major, and you go on the list, and then folks reach out to you and say, "Hey, I took my best deer or whatever. I got this deer. I have no clue what it scores." They reach out to you, and then you're, as a volunteer, go score it, help them get the entry in if it makes it, and kind of tell them why fair chase and archery hunting is so important and what the records stand for.
And so if somebody's interested in that, one, where's it located? Two, how much does it cost to go through the program?
So each course has kind of a different price depending on where we have to go. If we do one, in Minnesota or Missoula, where the two different organizations have their headquarters and their sample trophies, I guess, the heads that we use for the training are located. That's generally your cheapest cost. It's going to be about $400. It's $200 to each organization for this 4-day course. And then if there's additional expenses, if we have to travel, if we have to you know, crate the trophies to some further location, that price can go up. So it's usually somewhere between $400 and $600 for this full-on course. And then if you're interested, you can go on to Pope and Young's website. There's an application on there that's filled out. It's a digital application, and we are notified. When you're applying, if you really want to do it, there's some questions for both organizations saying how far are you willing to travel. There's basically one instructor for, Pope and Young and one instructor for Boone and Crockett that do all the courses. So, will we be, for example, in Colorado in the next 3 years? Probably not. If you're willing to travel within a state region, will we be somewhere in that part of the country? Maybe. So if you really want to do it, you may have some travel expenses. They do bounce around. Again, we generally do one or two a year in Missoula. Just because Boone and Crockett's headquartered here, we can do it very cheaply. All the stuff's already here. We occasionally do them in Minnesota. We've got one coming up in Ogden, Utah, that's actually already full April 6th. We have another one that we're doing, up St. Cloud, Minnesota, that is mid-May, that I think is pretty close to full. So they kind of bounce around. So you put in your application, say how far you'd be willing to travel. And then, just kind of a waiting period until, hey, we need somebody in this area and we're close to them or whatever. And then you'd get the invite.
So in Colorado right now, how many official measures are there?
If I had to guess, I'd say 20 to 30. I don't know that off the top of my head. I mean, Colorado's got a pretty good saturation. Texas has a ton. I can tell you, if you're from California, you want to be a major, you'll get invited to the next course. That's one area we cannot keep majors in. Colorado right now it's not one of the states that we're worried that we don't have representation. So we're sitting pretty good. Doesn't mean we wouldn't invite somebody from there, but we're always looking to make sure that we have decent representation across the entire state. And so, like I said, I've got a handful of friends that I know that major for both organizations in Colorado that are pretty active majors. And so like I said, there's plenty of them around there that would be happy to help you out if you need something scored.
So how do I get hold of a scorer? I know my friend just shot a 190. He shot it with his rifle,
Yeah,
mule deer. So I believe Boone and Crockett's 180
correct.
so he could put it in the book, and I'm going to talk to him and say,
Mhm.
hey, it's important. Here's the data set for no reason to put it
Well,
in.
I mean, again, 15 years running BNC's data set, Colorado hands down is the mule deer state. I mean,
No question about it. No
two
question
to
about
three
it.
times the number of the next closest state. Mule deer in general are not doing great. And so we're seeing a decrease. Now, Colorado's still at the top of the heap. They're still putting out the most. It's still the place to go. But that deer, that is a very important data set when we say, hey, Colorado, we used to be seeing 150 every 3 years. Now we're seeing 65. Like, here's the data. And so that deer, 190, 180, that's an important data point. So we can show them, hey, this is the trend we're seeing. Both organizations, if you go on there, it says find an official measure. There's an interactive map for Boone and Crockett. Any Boone and Crockett scorer can also score for Pope and Young. We are getting to the point where they're jointly certified. So either organization, if you take it with a bow and it makes both books, it's two different missions. So I'd say put it in both. You kill a 190 mule deer with your bow, put it in Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett. Both those data sets need that data point. And those names are available, like I said, on the website. Both organizations, you just go on there, find an official measure, and they'll list the email, phone number, however they want to be contacted.
Yeah, the important thing for that buck is actually the location where he shot it. And back when I was doing some work for the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, I was on the Southeast Region Sportsman's Advisory Council. And what I found that the opportunity, hear that word, opportunity to kill a 200-inch buck exists in just about every single big game unit for mule deer that we have. The potential is there.
Mm-hmm.
Now that could be on the Kansas border, that could be on the Utah border, that could be on the Wyoming border, or they could be on the New Mexico border, and every single unit in between.
Yep.
And people get hung up, I think, on, well, they come from Eagle County. Here's they're the number one county. It may not
Right.
be 44. And that mean or not be. I'm just picking it. But so they say, I got to hunt there. No, you don't.
Yeah.
No, you don't. So the whole thing, and this is Hutch's tip for this podcast, is do your homework. Digital scouting has never been any better than it is right now, and every single day it gets better. So you can do all your homework sitting in the comfort of your home, and you can figure out one, where the deer are, and they're not. Two, the migration routes. Three, what has been a recent fire, hint, hint. And four, access. And all those things change, folks, every single year. But if you do your homework, then you say, I'm going to go check out unit 511. I'm just saying a unit. And then you start getting out there and watching the bachelor groups and see what they're doing and see who's going to pop up to be a stud. And it's not that hard, but it takes effort.
Yeah.
And it takes luck also. Right place, right time. A lot of deer, big deer have been killed that way. But if you really want to invest in it, that's the secret to hunting any species in Colorado. And there's a lot of great companies as well as hutchonhunting.com that'll help you do that.
Yeah, I would always get asked, oh, what's the secret to a big whatever it may be? The answer is time. I mean, you invest the time, you learn the unit, you learn the area, you know, you can enlist the help of someone, paying an outfitter or something that's put in the time, but at the end of the day, the key to these big successful animals is having the time and the knowledge to put into it. Can you get lucky and stumble on one? Certainly, but you look at the people that consistently take the top animals, they live it constantly. E-scouting, on the ground, actual scouting, learning everything they can about the animal, learning about its biology, knowing the weather patterns, knowing the fire patterns. I mean, all that stuff all comes together, and the more time you can put into a unit, it's not necessarily being in the best spot. It's knowing it better than anybody else, and that's going to put the biggest animal in front of you.
Folks, you got to work at it. And March 1st is the application period here in Colorado. The other ones, I know Alaska's already closed, Wyoming's already closed for elk. But you still have plenty of opportunities. There's plenty of companies out there that'll take your money, put your tags in, and like Garth Carter used to say, from hunting fool, apply, apply, apply. Because if you don't apply, I can guarantee it, you'll never draw a tag. Never.
I mean, my first tag I drew was an Oregon mountain goat tag. There was 1,317 people that put in for that tag. One name was drawn. All my buddies are like, why do you waste your time? Well, all of a sudden my name was the one that was drawn.
Boom. There you are.
It's like, hey, somebody's got to win. It might as well be me. That's always been my saying, is like, and I've been fortunate. I've drawn some pretty good tags. I play the tag game. Again, in the line of work I am, I know people in a lot of states, and the number of phone calls that we have strategizing about what unit we're going to try to get into, that we have the points to or whatever, it's almost just as fun for us. But yeah, get your name in. And the other thing too, yeah, it's some money, but man, this is what these states thrive on. I don't know how familiar your listeners would be, but like all the funding for all wildlife management, every one of these states has a significant portion that comes from hunting licenses. And so even if you're, shooting the moon and trying to draw the best sheep unit in Montana and you have to pay, whatever it is, man, even if you don't draw, that's a great, great donation to conservation. And that's at least how my wife and I justify how much we spend every year applying to all the states. So
We're laughing at it because my wife just rolls her eyes anymore. And just
yeah, it's funny. Everybody always like, oh, it's amazing. Your wife hunts as much as you do until it's application season. I have to pay twice what anybody else does.
and that's the way it is. And
Yep.
in the world of hunting and big game hunting, and I had some friends that hunted multiple states, and probably this was 10 years ago. He had $25,000 out at risk
Hmm.
for all the states that he was putting in. And he had the money, he could do it. But you think about that, but he was at the sheep and goats and limited tags for elk and this and that. They weren't low dollar, obviously, but he told me that. I went, holy right.
Yeah.
And that's
No,
a lot of money, folks.
and you do your research. That's what those tag firms will do for you. New Mexico, for example, you have to front everything, and they have some very expensive tags. And for most people, it's just going to be off the table to apply across the board for them because it is very cost prohibitive on how much you have to loan them. And there's not a lot of people out there that have that just sitting around that they don't need that money for a
Right.
couple of months. But there is opportunities for there's states that I kind of figure most of the states we apply for cost me about $200 a year. And I always look at my budget and say, hey, how many can we swing? And that's part of the game. And like I said, it's all to a good cause.
And it is, folks. So, Justin, this has been just great. And I look forward to their next conversation and talking about, Pope and Young. And how do I get a hat? How do I get a Pope and Young hat?
Those are on our website. We've got
Become a
hats.
member?
Yeah. We don't have a hat promotion going, but if that's something that you want to set up, we would happily do something for your listeners, give you a code or something that if they sign up, we'll throw a hat in.
So, listeners, he's the guy. And so I'm going to work with him. And I can tell you the code right now. It's going to be HOH 2024. And so Justin and I'll work that out. But, it's to a worthy cause. And the other day I was going through some papers and some folders, and I went, holy fright, I was a member for like 20 years in a row,
Wow.
you know, and I was a member because I just supported it, and I had all my friends, and I was, actively engaged. Since I retired, I haven't done that since, I went to crossbow. I didn't do that. But after talking to Justin and understanding how important the data is, not that my name's in a book or not, but just the data alone is helpful to support the North American model of wildlife conservation, and to be able to have specific data points that you can say, hey, wait a minute, here's what we're finding. And in this unit, this is happening. We're seeing an increase, we're seeing a decrease, and they can trend out drought years, good water years, all that information with your data by you submitting a very solid representative trophy. It's important. So the science is important. And folks, this guy, I didn't really understand that as much as I do today. And that's on me. And I hope my listeners will take that and say, hey, that is important. Because just as we're fighting here in Colorado, Save the Hunt Colorado, to fight for the science, not fight for the ballot management of all big game species.
Yeah,
That's my wrap up. What's your wrap up, Justin?
no, like I said, you guys are in a very valid fight now, supporting the model, and unfortunately, a lot of it has to hit something at home. I mean, this isn't the first run at this type of thing that's happened. It's not going to be the last. And so get behind these organizations, find those that you're really passionate about, become involved in them, work your way up to that board of directors level, help be the tip of the spear on these issues. And, that's how us nonprofits, get stuff done, is we have people that are engaged, excited. They come to the table, they put in the time and effort, and that's how we complete our mission, is through passionate folks. And so if you love bow hunting and you love the whole idea of it, we'd love to have you on board.
And with that, this is Hutch on Hunting saying thank you for listening in. And there's another podcast coming up next week. Thanks again, Justin.
Yeah, thank you.